Florence, or Firenze in Italian, is a city that feels like a living museum. It is often called the birthplace of the Renaissance, a period when art, science, and philosophy flourished between the 14th and 17th centuries. Walking through its narrow medieval streets, you are surrounded by masterpieces everywhere: towering cathedrals, ancient bridges, marble statues, and grand palaces. It was in this city that legends like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Botticelli, and Galileo once lived and created works that changed the world forever. The heart of Florence lies around the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, also known as the Duomo, with its iconic red dome, designed by Filippo Brunelleschi. The Arno River cuts through the city, reflecting stone bridges and golden sunlight, especially during sunrise and sunset. One of the most famous bridges is the Ponte Vecchio, or Old Bridge. It is unique because it has small shops built along it, mostly jewelers and goldsmiths. The bridge has survived wars, floods, and centuries of change, remaining one of Florence's most iconic landmarks. Just beyond the Ponte Vecchio, on the south side of the Arno River, in a district called the Old, stands the magnificent Palazzo Pitti. Unlike the busy historic center filled with crowds and shops, this side of Florence feels more peaceful and elegant. The Palazzo Pitti dominates the area with its massive stone facade and quiet strength. Surrounded by charming streets, artisan workshops, and traditional Tuscan cafes, Palazzo Pitti is more than just a building. It is a symbol of power, ambition, and beauty. When you first see it, the palace looks grand and imposing, like a stone giant resting on the hillside. It stretches across a wide open square called Piazza Pitti, and its front walls are built from enormous blocks of rusticated stone. From a distance, it resembles a fortress, strong and unshakable, reflecting the wealth and power of the families who lived there. This palace stands in a location that feels perfectly balanced between urban life and nature. To the front, it faces the city of Florence, with its domes, towers, and riverside views. Behind it, hidden from the streets, lies a vast green world of terraces, fountains, sculptures, and tree-lined paths, the Boboli Gardens. Together, the palace and the gardens form one of the most important cultural and historical sites in Italy. Travelers who visit Florence often cross the Ponte Vecchio and continue straight up the gentle slope until they reach the wide courtyard of Palazzo Pitti. It feels like stepping into another world, quieter, slower, and deeply connected to Florence's royal past. What makes this location even more fascinating is how it connects to worlds: the artistic heart of Florence on one side and the peaceful natural beauty of the Boboli Gardens on the other. So as we begin this journey into the story of Palazzo Pitti and the Boboli Gardens, remember this: you are not just exploring a palace and a garden. You are stepping into the world of the Medici family, into the heart of Renaissance power, and into a place where art, architecture, nature, and human ambition came together to create something timeless. The story of Palazzo Pitti begins in the mid-15th century, long before it became a symbol of Medici power. It starts with a wealthy Florentine banker named Luca Pitti. He was a proud and ambitious man, deeply loyal to Cosimo de' Medici, the leader of the most influential family in Florence. Although Pitti was a supporter of the Medici, he secretly dreamed of outshining them. He wanted a residence so grand, so impressive, that it would make the Medici palaces look small in comparison. That dream gave birth to the idea of Palazzo Pitti. Around the year 1458, construction began on a grand palace on the south side of the Arno River. Unlike other noble palaces in Florence, which were built inside the city walls, Luca Pitti chose a location outside the main urban center. Back then, this area was quieter, with open land and fewer buildings. Building the palace there made a statement. He wanted space, freedom, and a residence that would dominate the surrounding area. The architect of the original palace is still debated by historians. Some believe it was designed by Filippo Brunelleschi, the genius who built Florence's famous cathedral dome. Others believe it was the work of his student, Luca Fanch. Whoever the architect was, the palace was built in a style that was bold and different from anything Florence had seen before. It had a massive facade made from rough-hewn sandstone blocks, called petrifort. These stones gave the building a rugged, powerful look, almost like a fortress rather than a home. The original design of the palace was far smaller than what we see today. It had only 7 large windows on the front and a central courtyard inside. However, it was still incredibly impressive for its time. Luca Pitti even ordered that the windows be larger than the doors of the Medici palace, just to show his wealth and pride. He also wanted the courtyard to be big enough to accommodate an entire army. His goal was clear: to create something unforgettable. But ambition comes with a price. The construction of the Palazzo Pitti was enormously expensive. Luca Pitti spent nearly all his money on the palace, hoping it would secure his legacy forever. At first, he was successful. The palace became a symbol of his power and influence. However, as time passed, the Pitti family faced financial difficulties. Luca Pitti died in 1472, and his heirs could not afford to complete or maintain the building. The palace remained unfinished and largely empty. For nearly a century, it stood as a silent monument to a dream that was never fully realized. The grand halls were quiet, the large windows unopened, and the massive walls watched over Florence from a distance. Everything changed in 1549. The powerful Medici family, now the rulers of Florence and Tuscany, were looking for a new residence, something larger, more elegant, and more suitable for a royal dynasty. Cosimo I de' Medici's wife, Eleonora di Toledo, fell in love with the palace and its peaceful location. She purchased it from the descendants of the Pitti family. With this purchase, the palace passed from one of Florence's proudest families into the hands of its most powerful rulers. From that moment, the story of Palazzo Pitti entered a new chapter, one of transformation, luxury, and grandeur. It was no longer just a symbol of ambition. It became the heart of Medici power. When the Medici family purchased Palazzo Pitti in 1549, the palace stood quiet and unfinished, like a sleeping giant. But under the rule of Cosimo I de' Medici and his wife, Eleonora di Toledo, it was reborn into a true royal residence, one that would reflect the power, elegance, and ambitions of the ruling family of Tuscany. Eleonora di Toledo, daughter of the Spanish viceroy of Naples, was not only a duchess but also a woman of refined taste and vision. She longed for a palace away from the noise and crowds of central Florence. She wanted a home with open spaces, fresh air, and room for her children to grow in safety. When she saw the Palazzo Pitti, surrounded by hills and countryside, she immediately recognized its potential. It felt like a place where royalty could live, not just with grandeur, but also with peace. After purchasing the palace, the Medici began a large-scale transformation. The first task was expansion. The old Pitti Palace was too small for a ruling dynasty. Cosimo and Eleonora commissioned architects like Bartolomeo Amanati to enlarge the building. He extended the facade, added new wings, and created a grand courtyard that connected the palace to the land behind it. This courtyard would later open into what would become the Boboli Gardens. Inside the palace, rooms were redesigned to reflect royal luxury. Walls were covered in fine silks, frescoes were painted on the ceilings, and floors were decorated with colored marble. Grand staircases were built so nobles and ambassadors could enter with dignity and ceremony. Each room was carefully planned to show power, intelligence, and beauty values. Of the Medici family, one of the palace's most important, Addison's, was the creation of a private bridge that connected Palazzo Pitti to the Uffizi and the government offices on the other side of the river. This was the Vasari corridor, designed by the famous artist and architect Giorgio Vasari in 1565. It stretched for almost 1 kilometer, running above shops on the Ponte Vecchio. The corridor allowed the Medici to walk from their home to the Palazzo Vecchio and Uffizi without being seen or harmed by the public. It was a symbol of both elegance and control. At the same time, Eleonora di Toledo began shaping the land behind the palace into gardens worthy of a royal court. She imagined terraces, fountains, statues, and long pathways overlooking Florence. This vision gave birth to the Boboli Gardens, which would later become one of the first examples of an Italian Renaissance garden and a model for royal gardens across Europe. Under the Medici, Palazzo Pitti became much more than a home. It became the heart of political power in Tuscany. Banquets, diplomatic meetings, weddings, and celebrations were held within its walls. Foreign kings, ambassadors, and artists were invited to witness the wealth and influence of Florence. Every detail of the palace, from its massive stone facade to its glittering rooms, was meant to send a message. The Medici were no longer just bankers or citizens of Florence. They were rulers, nobles, and patrons of art and science. They wanted the world to know their power would last for generations. This transformation marked the beginning of Palazzo Pitti's golden age. It was no longer the dream of one ambitious banker. It had become the home of a dynasty. From the outside, Palazzo Pitti does not try to charm you with delicate details or decorations. Instead, it impresses you with its sheer size, strength, and simplicity. It is one of the largest and most powerful-looking buildings in Florence, a structure that seems carved from the very rock of the city. Its architecture is a bold statement of Renaissance power, solid, confident, and eternal. The facade of the palace stretches across the wide Piazza Pitti, like an enormous stone wall. It is built from large, rough-cut blocks of sandstone, known as petroforte. These stones are not smooth or polished. They are deliberately rugged, giving the palace a fortress-like appearance. This style is called rustication, and it was often used in Renaissance architecture to show strength and authority. The blocks are so large and heavy that, even today, they evoke a feeling of timeless durability. The palace is divided horizontally into 3 main levels, each one slightly smaller than the one below, creating a sense of balance and symmetry. The lower level has huge arched doorways and windows, which make the building feel grounded and powerful. The second and third levels have rows of evenly spaced arches and windows, giving the facade rhythm and harmony. One of the most striking features of the facade is how simple and uncluttered it is. There are no statues, no carvings, no golden decorations on the outside, only strong stone, symmetry, and proportion. This simplicity makes the palace appear even more imposing, as if it has nothing to prove. In front of the palace lies the vast Piazza Pitti, an open square that was designed to enhance the palace's grandeur. The square slopes gently upward toward the main entrance, making the building appear even taller and more dominant. In the past, this space was used for parades, festivals, and public events hosted by the ruling families. Behind the central facade lies a large internal courtyard. This courtyard was expanded and redesigned by architect Bartolomeo Amanati in the late 16th century. It features elegant arcades supported by columns, and it serves as a transition between the palace's powerful exterior and its richly decorated interior. From this courtyard, doors lead to the grand staircases and the entrance to the Boboli Gardens. Another important architectural element is the Vasari corridor. Although it is less visible from the front, this elevated passageway connects Palazzo Pitti to the Uffizi Gallery and the Palazzo Vecchio, crossing the Arno River above the shops of the Ponte Vecchio. It was built for the Medici in 1565 so they could move across the city without being seen or threatened. As the years went by, the palace continued to expand. New wings were added to both sides, and the central section was extended further into the square. However, the architects who worked on it carefully preserved the original style: massive stones, symmetrical rows of arches, and an imposing, fortress-like shape. Palazzo Pitti is a perfect example of Renaissance architecture, where beauty is achieved not through decoration, but through balance, geometry, and proportion. It was designed not to please, but to impress. To stand before it is to feel the weight of history, the power of the Medici, the ambition of Luca Pitti, and the genius of Renaissance architects. Stepping inside Palazzo Pitti is like entering a different world, one completely opposite from its strong and fortress-like exterior. While the outside is powerful and austere, the interior is rich, elegant, and filled with art, gold, and history. Every hall, every wall, every ceiling tells a story of royalty, wealth, and artistic genius. Today, the palace contains several museums, each preserving treasures from different eras of Florence's past. The most famous and visited part of the palace is the Palatine Gallery. This gallery was once used as the royal reception rooms of the Medici family, where they welcomed ambassadors, nobles, and foreign guests. The gallery contains more than 500 paintings, mainly from the Renaissance and Baroque periods. The artworks are not arranged in a typical museum style, with labels and spacing. Instead, they cover the walls from top to bottom in the traditional style of grand European palaces, creating a feeling of overwhelming luxury. Some of the world's greatest artists are represented here. There are masterpieces by Raphael, including the famous Madonna of the Chair and La Donna Volata. You can also find paintings by Titian, such as La Bella, full of mystery and elegance. Works by Peter, Paul Rubens, Caravaggio, Van Dyck, and Andrea del Sarto fill the rooms with dramatic light and emotion. Above the paintings, the ceilings are decorated with elaborate frescoes showing mythological scenes, painted by artists like Pietro de Cri. Next to the gallery are the royal apartments, also known as the Grand Ducal Apartments. These were once the private living quarters of the Medici, the House of Lorraine, and later the Savoy kings of Italy. The rooms are decorated with luxurious furniture, silk draperies, marble fireplaces, and portraits of royal family members. Each room has a story, for example, the Green Room, the Throne Room, and the Queen's Bedroom. Walking through these spaces, you can almost imagine the sound of silk dresses, whispering diplomats, and candlelit evenings. Another section of the palace is the Treasury of the Grand Dukes, formerly called the Silver Museum. This part holds dazzling collections of Medici jewelry, gold and silver objects, crystal vases, precious stones, and ornate cups used in royal banquets. These objects show the Medici's love for art, science, and beauty, as many of them were designed by famous artists and goldsmiths of the time. On the upper floor of the palace is the Gallery of Modern Art. Despite its name, it mainly contains paintings and sculptures from the late 18th to early 20th centuries. Many of the works are by Italian artists from the Romantic, Neoclassical, and early Impressionist periods. The rooms here are quieter and filled with natural light. From the windows, visitors can enjoy breathtaking views of the Boboli Gardens and the rooftops of Florence. Other parts of the palace include the Costume Gallery, which preserves historical clothing worn by the Medici and later dynasties. There is also the Porcelain Museum, located in a small pavilion in the Boboli Gardens. It displays fine porcelain pieces from European courts, including Meissen, Sevres, and Capodi. Each item shows how fashion, taste, and trade evolved among royal families. Inside Palazzo Pitti, art is not just something to look at, it surrounds you completely. The floors are made of colorful marble patterns. The walls are covered with velvet, silk, or gold leaf. The ceilings are alive with frescoes of gods, goddesses, clouds, and angelic figures. Crystal chandeliers hang from above, reflecting light onto mirrors and gilded frames. This is not just a museum. It is a living memory of the Medici family and the royal courts that followed them. Every painting, every piece of furniture, every jewel reminds us that this palace was once alive with royalty, power, and elegance. The Palatine Gallery, located on the first floor of Palazzo Pitti, is one of the most prestigious and visually stunning art galleries in Italy. Unlike traditional museums, where artwork is arranged chronologically or by theme, the Palatine Gallery follows the historical tradition of a gallery of magnificence, where masterpieces are displayed in richly decorated rooms as a symbol of power, wealth, and refined taste. This gallery was curated primarily during the reign of the Medici, and later expanded by the House of Lorraine. The gallery contains over 500 Renaissance and Baroque paintings, displayed in ornate gilded frames, often covering entire walls from floor to ceiling. Each room is adorned with elaborate stucco, gold leaf, frescoed ceilings, and crystal chandeliers, giving visitors the feeling of stepping back into a royal residence rather than a typical museum layout. The paintings were not just decorations, but statements of prestige, meant to impress royal guests and visiting dignitaries. Some of the most notable artists featured in the Palatine Gallery include Raphael, Titian, Caravaggio, Rubens, Pietro, and Andrea del Sarto. Among the gallery's most famous works is Raphael's Madonna of the Grand Duke, a delicate and intimate depiction of the Virgin Mary holding the infant Christ. Another highlight is Titian's La Bella, celebrated for its soft textures and elegant portrayal of female beauty. Caravaggio's dramatic works stand out with their masterful use of light and shadow, especially Sleeping Cupid, a rare portrayal of vulnerability in mythological art. The ceilings of many rooms were painted by Baroque artist Pietro de, who created vast allegorical frescoes celebrating the Medici family. These frescoes depict divine figures, virtues, and mythological scenes that glorify the dynasty's rule over Florence and Tuscany. The most famous ceiling fresco is in the Sala di Venere Hall of Venus, where Venus is portrayed as the symbol of beauty and harmony, reflecting the Medici's role as patrons of the arts. The layout of the Palatine Gallery includes several notable rooms, such as Sala di Marte, Hall of Mars, dedicated to themes of war and victory; Sala di Giove, Hall of Jupiter, symbolizing divine authority and justice; Sala di Saturno, Hall of Saturn, a throne room once used by the Grand Dukes; Sala dell'Iliade, Hall of the Iliad, named for its mythological fresco cycle inspired by Homer's epic. Walking through the Palatine Gallery feels like navigating a living palace rather than a silent museum. Visitors experience the same halls and views that once belonged to the Medici rulers. Sunlight filters through large windows overlooking Florence, casting a soft glow on the golden frames and marble surfaces. The rooms retain much of their original furniture, tapestries, and decorative elements, which enhances the immersive historical atmosphere. In essence, the Palatine Gallery is not just a collection of artwork. It is a powerful expression of Florence's artistic heritage and the Medici family's legacy. It brings together painting, architecture, and royal history in one grand setting, making it one of the most unforgettable parts of Palazzo Pitti. The royal apartments of Palazzo Pitti offer a rare and intimate glimpse into the private lives of the Medici, the House of Lorraine, and later the Kings of Italy. Located on the first floor, adjacent to the Palatine Gallery, these rooms were once the living quarters of Grand Dukes, Duchesses, Queens, and Kings. Unlike the gallery's lavish and ceremonial spaces, the royal apartments reflect a more personal environment, where rulers dined, slept, planned state affairs, and entertained close guests. These rooms still contain original furnishings, tapestries, portraits, silk draperies, and personal objects that belong to Tuscany's ruling families. As visitors walk through the apartments, they experience the evolving styles of three major dynasties: the Renaissance elegance of the Medici, the refined Baroque influence of the Lorraine family, and the 19th century Savoy monarchy, which used the palace as a royal residence when Florence briefly became the capital of United Italy, 1865 to 1871. Some of the most important rooms include the Sala di Udienza audience room. This is where the Grand Duke held private meetings and received ambassadors. The walls are adorned with golden stucco, crimson damask fabrics, and portraits of Medici rulers. The throne room, originally decorated by the Lorraine family. This room contains a gilded throne, elaborate chandeliers, and marble floors. It was used for official state ceremonies and royal receptions. The Queen's apartment, Cortile della Regina. This suite of rooms was used by Queen Margherita of Savoy during the late 19th century. The rooms include a bedroom with silk-covered walls, a private study, and a dressing room filled with luxurious furniture and polished mirrors. The King's apartment, Cortile del Re. These rooms were occupied by King Umberto I of Italy. They include his study, military-themed decorations, and a stately bedroom with a canopied bed. The music room, a beautifully decorated space containing musical instruments, gilded mirrors, and frescoed ceilings, where royal family members and guests enjoyed private performances. Throughout the apartments, visitors can see exquisite tapestries produced by the Orazzeria Medici Tapestry Workshop, depicting mythological scenes, floral patterns, and historical events. The floors are made of polished parquet wood, while ceilings are embellished with frescoes of allegories, virtues, and scenes of courtly life. One of the most enchanting aspects of the royal apartments is their connection to daily life. For example, the bathrooms added during the Savoy period reflect 19th century technological innovation, with marble bathtubs and running water luxuries uncommon at the time. The dining rooms display porcelain sets, silverware, and crystal glass used during royal banquets. From many windows, the apartments offer stunning views of the Boboli Gardens, creating a picturesque backdrop of greenery, fountains, and statues. This view emphasized the power of the rulers, who could look out upon their vast gardens and beyond to the city of Florence. Walking through the royal apartments feels like stepping into a living world of the past, where politics, luxury, art, and personal life intertwined. It completes the story of Palazzo Pitti, not just as a museum, but as a home to centuries of rulers who shaped the history and culture of Florence. The Boboli Gardens, Giardino di Boboli, located directly behind Palazzo Pitti, are one of the greatest examples of an Italian Renaissance garden. Stretching over 111 acres, the gardens are a masterpiece of landscape architecture, blending nature, art, and mythological symbolism. Originally designed for the Medici family, the gardens served not only as a place of leisure but also as a political statement, a symbol of power, order, and artistic patronage. The creation of the Boboli Gardens began in the mid-16th century when Eleanor of Toledo, wife of Cosimo I de' Medici, purchased the land behind the Palazzo Pitti. She commissioned the architect, Niccolò Tribolo, who had previously worked on the gardens at Villa Medici. After Tribolo's death, the project was carried on by Bartolomeo Amanati and Giorgio Vasari, and later expanded by Bernardo Buono, who introduced grottos, theatrical elements, and water features inspired by classical mythology. The garden's design follows a structured and symmetrical layout, typical of Renaissance ideals. It is arranged along a central axis that rises up the hillside, offering panoramic views of Florence and the surrounding Tuscan countryside. The main entrance opens onto the amphitheater, a vast semicircular space carved into the hillside. In the 17th century, this area hosted courtly celebrations, theatrical performances, and grand Medici weddings. At its center originally stood the ancient granite obelisk from Egypt, which was later moved to its current position inside the garden. One of the most iconic features is the Viottolone Cypress Avenue, a long, tree-lined path that stretches southward, flanked by ancient statues and leading to a pond with a fountain and lush garden island. This perspective creates a dramatic sense of grandeur, symbolizing the Medici's control over nature and culture. Throughout the gardens are fountains, grottos, temples, and sculptures that combine Roman mythology, allegory, and natural beauty. Among the most famous elements are the Grotta del Buontalenti Grotto, an artificial cave filled with sculptures, stalactites, frescoes, and a copy of Michelangelo's Prisoners statues. It represents a dreamlike world between reality and imagination. The Fountain of Neptune, also known as the Fountain of the Fork, depicting Neptune holding his trident, symbolizing dominion over water and the Medici's political reach. The Caffè House, an elegant 18th century pavilion in Rococo style, used by the Lorraine family for outdoor refreshments and panoramic views. The Knight's Garden, Giardino del Cavaliere, a secluded terrace garden with rose bushes, ancient urns, and views over the city. As the gardens evolved over time, each ruling family added new elements. The Medici established the foundation and grand layout. The Lorraine family introduced botanical species and neoclassical features, while the Savoy monarchy added modern touches, such as pavilions and tree-lined avenues. The Boboli Gardens are not just a beautiful park, they are an open-air museum. More than 300 statues decorate its pathways and lawns, ranging from Roman antiquities to Renaissance and Baroque sculptures. The gardens also inspired other European royal parks, including Versailles in France and the Prussian Gardens in Potsdam. Today, visitors can stroll through shaded lanes, climb marble steps, sit beside fountains, and explore centuries-old artworks surrounded by nature. The blend of architecture, landscape, and symbolism makes the Boboli Gardens an essential part of Florence's cultural and historical legacy. The Boboli Gardens are often described as an open-air museum, filled with an extraordinary collection of sculptures, fountains, grottos, and architectural features spanning from ancient Roman times to the Renaissance and beyond. Each element in the garden is carefully placed to evoke mythology, power, and harmony between nature and art. These artistic installations were not merely decorative, they expressed the Medici family's cultural dominance and connection to classical antiquity. Over statues are scattered throughout the gardens, representing gods, heroes, animals, and historical figures. Many are original Roman statues brought from ancient ruins, while others are Renaissance or Baroque creations commissioned specifically for the gardens. Ancient Roman statues. Some sculptures date back to the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, including busts of emperors, mythological deities like Venus and Apollo, and heroic male figures. These were intended to reflect the Medici's admiration for classical culture. and their belief in the revival of ancient ideals. Renaissance and Baroque sculptures. Artists such as June Bologna and Bartolomeo Amanati created allegorical statues that embody virtues like justice, wisdom, and strength. One of the most beloved pieces is the Dwarf Morgante by Valerio Cioli, humorously depicting Cosimo I de' Medici's court jester riding a tortoise. The obelisk in Roman Basin, in the amphitheater, stands a 3,000-year-old Egyptian obelisk surrounded by a granite basin from ancient Rome, symbolizing the Medici's global influence and interest in antiquity. Fountains of the Boboli Gardens. Water plays a key role in the design of the gardens, both as a practical feature and a symbol of life, power, and wealth. The fountains in Boboli Gardens are often accompanied by mythological figures and complex sculptural groups. Fountain of Neptune Fontana di Nettuno, known as the Fountain of the Fork. Neptune dominates the scene with his trident, representing control over the seas. The figure was sculpted by Stoldo Lorenzi in the 16th century. Fountain of the Ocean Fontana dell'Oceano, designed by Gian Bologna and completed by his student Pietro Tacca. This fountain features the god Oceanus, surrounded by river gods symbolizing the Nile, Ganges, and Euphrates. It emphasizes the Medici's vision of global power. Isolotto Complex. At the end of the Viattolone, this tranquil pond contains an island with a statue group of Perseus and Andromeda, framed by balustrades, lemon trees, and small fountains. Grottos, the theatrical and surreal side of Renaissance. Art grottos are among the most unique and imaginative features of the Boboli Gardens. They combine architecture, sculpture, painting, and water effects to create an illusionistic world between nature and fantasy. Grotta del Buontalenti. Buontalenti Grotto, designed by Bernardo Buontalenti in the late 16th century. This grotto is the most famous. Its facade is decorated with stucco formations resembling dripping limestone and animal figures. Inside frescoes, mosaics, and sculptures create an enchanting atmosphere. Originally, it housed replicas of Michelangelo's Prisoners, symbolizing the soul trapped in stone. Grotta Grande. Located near the Palazzo, this grotto contains frescoed walls, shells, and coral-like structures that mimic natural caves. Grotta di Madama. A smaller grotto with frescoes and rock-like decorations located near the Knight's Garden. Thematic symbolism and function. Many sculptures and fountains within the gardens carry symbolic meanings connected to power, mythology, and the natural world. Neptune symbolizes control over the elements and the Medici's rule over Tuscany's waterways. The ocean fountain symbolizes the global influence of the Medici dynasty. Allegorical statues reflect virtues expected of noble rulers' courage, wisdom, and justice. Artistic influence on Europe. The artistic elements of the Boboli Gardens influenced the design of other great European gardens, including the Palace of Versailles and the Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna. These gardens adopted the ideas of perspective, theatrical architecture, and elaborate fountains. Walking through the Boboli Gardens today, visitors encounter a harmonious blend of art and nature at every step, from grand statues and fountains to secluded grottos and shaded pathways. These elements enhance the magic and majesty of the garden, transforming it into one of the most iconic outdoor museums in the world. Palazzo Pitti and the Boboli Gardens together form one of the most extraordinary cultural and historical complexes in Italy. They represent centuries of artistic innovation, royal grandeur, and the evolution of European aesthetics. From the Medici family to the House of Lorraine and the Savoy monarchy, each dynasty left its mark on this architectural masterpiece, and its sprawling gardens, shaping it into the iconic landmark we see today. 1. Legacy of Palazzo Pitti and Boboli Gardens. The legacy of Palazzo Pitti is deeply tied to the legacy of Florence itself. As the residence of the Medici Grand Dukes, it became the center of political power and artistic patronage during the Renaissance. The palace later evolved under the Austrian Lorraine rulers and finally became a symbol of the unified kingdom of Italy in the 19th century. Each era added new layers of art, architecture, and culture. The Boboli Gardens, meanwhile, pioneered the Italian Renaissance garden style. Their geometric layout, dramatic perspective views, and symbolic sculptures inspired similar gardens across Europe, including Versailles in France and the Schönbrunn Palace in Austria. Today, Boboli is seen as a living museum of Renaissance landscape design. Visitor experience. Today, modern visitors to Palazzo Pitti and the Boboli Gardens can explore a wide range of museums and historical rooms that reflect different time periods and artistic styles. The palace contains several attractions: Palatine Gallery, Galleria Paletna, home to masterpieces by Raphael, Titian, Rubens, Caravaggio, and more. Royal apartments, appartamenti, really preserved living quarters of royal families, featuring original furniture, silk draperies, and decorative ceilings. Gallery of Modern Art, featuring 18th to early 20th century Italian paintings and sculptures. Museum of Costume and Fashion, displaying historical clothing, jewelry, and royal attire. Treasury of the Grand Dukes, formerly the Silver Museum, featuring precious objects, gemstones, and luxury artifacts. Stepping into the Boboli Gardens, visitors are greeted by vast green landscapes, cypress-lined avenues, ancient statues, water fountains, and panoramic views. Popular visitor highlights include the amphitheater fountain of Neptune, Grotta del Boiantolante Viatalone in Isolotto, Pond Knight's Garden, and Cafe House. There are shaded walking paths, benches overlooking Florence's skyline, and secret corners filled with flowers, grottos, and sculptures. During spring and summer, the gardens bloom with roses, jasmine, and citrus trees, creating a serene and romantic atmosphere. Tips for visitors. Best time to visit, early morning or late afternoon to avoid the midday heat and tourist crowds. Spring and autumn provide the best weather and vibrant greenery. Tickets. A combined ticket allows access to Palazzo Pitti Boboli Gardens, Porcelain Museum, and Bardini Garden. Booking in advance is recommended. Footwear. Comfortable walking shoes are essential due to gravel paths, slopes, and long walking distances. Photography, allowed in most areas, but tripods and professional filming equipment may require permits. Duration. To fully explore both the palace and gardens, allocate at least 4 to 6 hours. Final reflections. Palazzo Pitti and the Boboli Gardens are not just historical sites, they are symbols of Florence's enduring spirit of art, beauty, and innovation. Here, visitors can walk in the footsteps of powerful families, admire masterpieces from the Renaissance to modern times, and experience an environment where nature and human creativity merge. From the grand halls of the Palatine Gallery to the shady lanes of the Boboli Gardens, every corner tells a story of ambition, genius, and timeless elegance. Whether you are an art lover, history enthusiast, or simply a traveler captivated by beauty, this magnificent complex offers a journey through centuries of culture and inspiration.